For the remainder of this lesson, we're going to discuss how to style different HTML elements. And we're going to introduce properties that are applicable to specific elements based on which elements they're most applicable to. However, it's important to bear in mind that a lot of these properties can span multiple different elements. So play around with the styling to figure out what things are applicable and what styles and design you like. But we begin with text styling, and for text styling you'll notice that we replaced our body with this paragraph element. The quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog, and one of the first things we ought to notice in our HTML is in our head element we have this new link that is a link to a Google font style sheet called Roboto, and I'm going to show you how to download and how to include this font family, as it's called, in our HTML and CSS. And we can include it by going to the Google Fonts page at fonts.google.com, and it's actually the first font family that shows up. And we can grab it by clicking on the plus sign, and a notification will come up at the bottom that says one family selected. Then we click on that, and we select Customize, and we pick the font weights that we want, and it gives us an example of what each of the different font weights are. And so I'm going to go ahead and select thin, light, and regular, and it indicates as well what the load time is, meaning how much data does it need to load when your page loads in the browser. And we want to limit our selections so that it doesn't take too long to load these fonts. And so then when we go back to embed, we'll see this link that's available for us to copy and paste, and that's what we're going to want to paste inside of our HTML. Now that we have the Roboto font family available, let's go ahead and apply it to our paragraph element. And we'll do that by going into our style.css file and adding a selector that grabs our paragraph element and sets the font family property to a value of Roboto. But you'll also notice that we have these two additional values set in a comma-separated list, and that's because there may be times where for whatever reason Roboto is not available because it doesn't load, or some other problem, in which case we want it to then back up to sans serif. And then if sans serif isn't available for whatever reason, it'll back up to serif. And sans serif and serif are generic families in CSS, whereas Roboto is a custom family that we got from Google Fonts. The next thing that we're going to do is set the font weight, and you'll remember when we went and downloaded Roboto from Google Fonts that we selected 100, 300, and 400. So these are the font weights that are available to us, and I'm going to go ahead and select to apply 300 as the font weight property. Following the font weight, let's go ahead and select the font size that we want. Now, we have a choice of how we want to do this. We can either use pixels or we can use EM. And best practice is to use EM, which is a relative sizing that essentially states our font size for whatever property or whatever element that we're styling is going to be a proportion of the current default font size. And so if people change the default font size of their browsers, our web application will be responsive to their font size. And so I'm going to elect to use EM and set my font size of my paragraph to 1.5 EM. Now the default font size for a browser is 16 pixels. So assuming that our user hasn't changed their browser settings, then this 1.5 EM will calculate out to 16 times 1.5 pixels, so it'll be 24 pixels. The next setting that I want to set is the color, and I'm just going to set this to hashtag or to hex code 858585. And this effectively works out to be kind of a moderate gray color. Then I'm going to set the text alignment to be centered. And finally, I'm going to add some margin between the paragraph and the top of our page by setting top margin of 10%. Let's hop over into our browser now to see the effect that our styling rules have on our paragraph element. This is what our paragraph looked like before applying the styling rules, and when we refresh our browser we can see what the after looks like and note just how much better and aesthetically pleasing it looks. And of course we can check to see what rules affect what, or what rules are currently being applied to it, by clicking on the element, selecting inspect, and then looking at our style rules and seeing, for instance, this paragraph rule that has all of the rules we just entered in our style.css file.